It's a pleasure to contribute to this bill, and I very much welcome this bill and pay tribute to the ministerial team who are rightly focusing on opportunity for all. And I say that as somebody who went to a school bottom of the league tables in Worcestershire and employed many young people in the 10 years that I ran a business, and I recognise the absolute importance of equipping all young people, regardless of backgrounds, with the necessary skills to fulfil their potential in their working lives. And I just want to focus on a very narrow part, which is to do with opportunities for young disabled students, particularly with the apprenticeship programme. Typically in this country, non-disabled people would have an 80% chance of having employment. If you have a disability, that drops to 48%. That's still up 4% since 2010, an extra 500,000 more disabled people in work. But if you have a learning disability, you would typically only expect to have a 6% chance of having a meaningful, sustainable career. And all governments of all political persuasions have tried their very best to look at different initiatives, different programmes to try and boost that figure, but by and large it's stuck rigidly to 6%. And we all desperately want to see huge improvements in that area. And I had the pleasure of going to visit Foxes Academy in Bridgewater. It was a former working hotel that has been taken over by the Foxes Academy, and they take on young adults with learning disabilities in a 3-year programme. And for those first 2 years, their time is split between learning about independent living, slowly progressing up the floors of the hotel as they become more and more independent, more and more skilled and confident, and learning real-life, tangible skills within the hotel that can be transferred to local employers in the restaurant trade, the care homes and the other local hotels. Now, I went on this visit and I was absolutely staggered to see that 80% of those students, so not 6%, 80% of those students at the end of that 3-year course would remain in work. And that was because they had a 3-year constructive, patient approach to give them those skills. And in that final 3rd year, they would spend that year in supported training within those local employers, patiently being taught those skills that were needed. And it was no surprise that those employers, having invested in the training and support, we were then keen to keep those young adults on. And because I was so impressed, I invited them to come and see me as the former Minister for Disabled People in Parliament. And I said, well, why can't we have one of these in every single town? And they said, well, the first 2 years we could take on as many students as we could fit in the hotel. The challenge is the cost of the supported training in the 3rd year. And I said to them, well, surely this is just an apprenticeship by another name. Why can't we call it an apprenticeship? You can access the funding for the government's commendable pledge to have 3 million more apprentices by the end of this Parliament. And they said, well, we can't, because most of our students wouldn't get the Grade C and GCSE Maths and English, which is the typical entry required to access an apprenticeship. So we agreed that we would look into this as a matter of urgency, and I met with a former Minister, my honourable friend for Grantham and Stamford, and he shared with me that this was both a frustrating situation but a real opportunity to make a difference. So we commissioned my honourable friend for Blackpool North and Cleveleys, alongside my honourable friend for Daventry, my honourable friend for Cheshire and Amersham, Scope and Mencap and many other experienced colleagues to look at what we could do. And part of this Maynard review, for which we only gave him 3.5 weeks, because we had a suspicion that myself and the honourable friend for Grantham might no longer be in a position to sign things off after 3.5 weeks, and it's a credit he rushed it through. And they identified that if we did make an exemption for those with a learning disability, that we could offer real tangible opportunities for those young people through the apprenticeship programme. And I am delighted that the government has been so positive in welcoming that. And in the closing remarks, I would be very keen to hear what are the steps to see this happen, how quickly we can do this, how we can advertise this to local employers, because the other key lesson was that there were so many local employers who were willing to engage and offer that opportunity. And they weren't doing that to tick a box. They weren't doing that to do a favour because they wanted to feel good. They did it because these young adults, after the patient training, proved to be excellent employees who would stay with their organisation year after year. And I got sent photographs of many of these young adults in their first steps into the working career, and every single one of them had a huge beaming smile because they had the pride of having that opportunity to work, not always full-time, sometimes part-time, but they felt proud, as did their parents. And one slight other request to do with UTCs. I'm very proud that Swindon has its own University Technical College. I am a huge fan. In fact, our party launched its party manifesto, election manifesto from the Swindon UTC. It's a wonderful building mixing modern technology and Swindon's proud railway heritage in one fantastic building. But I think the potential of these could go much further if the entry was at the beginning of secondary school age, not 14. Because when I've talked to many of those students, they weren't always students who chose to go there because this was the right route for them, but because they were unhappy in their secondary school. Yet I've also talked to people who should have gone to the UTC, who have that natural aptitude to the courses that are being offered, the higher engineering, the computer programming. These are the sorts of roles that we have desperate skill shortages of in this country. Yet they were already settled in their secondary school. They have lots of friends. They didn't want to break that, and they then miss out on not taking advantage of that. And if we could change that entry level to traditional secondary school, they will compete on an even footing, and those students that would most benefit from this opportunity would be more likely to take that. So this is a great bill. Very happy to.
Grateful for him giving way, as well as talking to the young people about that time at which they would enter the UTC. Would he not agree that it in fact is parental knowledge and parental information that is so important at influencing that choice, and the lack of parental information, particularly from many local authorities, does stop the progress of the UTCs?
I thank the honourable member for that point, and it's a really important point. And one of the biggest challenges when you talk to the heads of the UTCs is typically secondary schools, when recruiting or seeking to recruit students, will go into the neighbouring primary schools, do assemblies, do displays, contact the parents, and the primary schools will work with those secondary schools to advertise those opportunities. But obviously UTCs are seeking to take students away from secondary schools, and with those pupils comes the funding. And therefore, the secondary schools are not always receptive to opening their doors up to their students to say, look, there's an alternative. Why don't you take the funding that follows you to another organisation? So actually, by putting it back on that same footing, the same entry point to secondary schools, then the primary schools will then be able to engage with those parents and provide those opportunities. And my final request with UTCs is they are training those young adults for those skills that we very much need. And we need to do far more to get those businesses to support the UTCs by providing mentoring, by providing work experience, providing expertise. And too many local businesses are not yet up to speed with the great links that they can get from UTCs. And by investing early in those students, those will be their next generation of staff. And we can use things like the business rates mailer, which all businesses, whether they like it or not, will get one every year. And we could be putting information about apprenticeships, about the UTCs, and then local businesses will know by investing a bit of time and support they can help fill those skills gaps in the future. So I very much welcome this bill. It's a really positive step in the right direction to deliver opportunity for all.